The Special Intensive Revision or SIR of electoral roll in West Bengal has triggered a major political debate ahead of the 2026 assembly elections. Designed as a clean-up exercise, the process removes duplicate entries, deceased voters and those who have migrated. But this time, an added layer of document verification or adjudication has led to a large-scale deletion, raising concern about its impact on the electoral landscape. Has this exercise altered the balance of voters across constituencies? And more importantly, could it influence the outcome of the elections? The key concern stems from the data suggesting that constituencies with higher minority population have seen relatively greater deletion. Given the state's voting pattern, this raises question about whether the process could have political implications. At a macro level, the overall numbers of electors have not necessarily declined dramatically. In fact, even after SIR, the total number of voters remain higher than the number of people who actually voted in 2024 Lok Sabha elections. However, the real challenge lies in turnout. For the total vote cast in 2026 to match or exceed previous levels, turnout will need to rise sharply, from 81.7% in 2021 to nearly 89%, which would be a record for the state. So while the total voter base may appear stable, the deeper question is about distribution. Where exactly are these deletions happening and who is being affected? Data indicates that deletions are uneven across constituencies. As many as 67 assembly constituencies that have elected at least one minority or Muslim MLA since 2011 recorded a higher share of deletion during the adjudication process. A similar trend is visible in 16 constituencies associated with the Matua community, a politically significant group in the state. These are not just isolated pockets, but electorally important segments that often influence broader political outcome. There are also signs that some constituencies could see an actual drop in the number of votes cast. How significant is that risk? So in 3 constituencies, the number of electors have already fallen below the number of votes cast in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections. Beyond that, in 96 constituencies, the gap between the current electors and the previous voter turnout is less than 10%. This means these seats are on the edge, where even a small dip in turnout could lead to fewer votes being cast compared to the last major elections. Which brings us to the turnout, the factor that could ultimately determine whether these changes matter. To maintain 2024 level voting, turnout will need to cross 90% in as many as 121 constituencies. This includes a significant number of seats with higher minority or Matua population. So whether voters in these areas turn out in large numbers, possibly in response to the deletion, will be crucial. And that leads us to the central question. Has this process resulted in electoral gerrymandering? There is no definitive answer. A conclusive assessment would require detailed community-wise data or voter deletion, which is not publicly available. So, however, the pattern of higher deletion in certain type of constituency raises the possibility of uneven impact. At the same level, there are alternative explanations. What could those be? So one explanation is that these constituencies may have had a higher proportion of inactive or duplicate voters, leading to more deletion during the cleanup process. Another possibility is behavioral. So some of these areas recorded relatively low voter turnout in previous elections, which may reflect low voter engagement rather than targeted exclusion. So is this a case of systematic bias or statistical coincidence? So that remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that the SIR process has introduced a new variable into the electoral equation. With several constituencies facing tight margins between voters and voter turnout level, even small shift could become a significant in closely contested seats. Ultimately, the answer will lie in the voter turnout once voting takes place. Will affected voters mobilize in greater numbers, or will these deletions translate into reduced participation? The Special Intensive Revision has raised important questions, but the final verdict will come on the polling day. We will keep tracking all the latest updates. Till then, keep watching Times of India.